Welcome to The Savvy Patient, where we make medicine make sense.
I'm Dr. Gillian Goddard. I'm an endocrinologist and an expert in women's hormonal health with 2 decades of clinical experience.
I'm Erin Stein, a writer, editor, filmmaker, and media psychologist, but definitely not a doctor.
By looking at the data and breaking down the research, we will help you get savvy. Remember, this podcast is not meant to replace medical advice from your own doctor. Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Savvy Patient.
Today, we're going to talk about cortisol.
And stress.
I don't know much about cortisol, but I know a lot about stress.
I think most of us have personal experience with stress on some level. It's just a matter of how much.
I think many of our listeners would feel they have a lot of experience with it, especially in their midlife years.
Ah, yes. The sandwich years.
The sandwich years, the years that our bodies decide to go haywire.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as always, Gillian will tell us, what is cortisol? All I know is it's a hormone.
It is a hormone. It's made in your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands are just these little, they look like 3-cornered hats, and they sit on top of your kidneys, which is where they get their name. They're adrenal above the kidneys. And they make a few different hormones, but one of the big hormones that they make, and the hormone we're going to be talking about today, is cortisol. So basically, when our bodies sense stress, the brain takes in that information. It sends that information to the hypothalamus, which is a part of the brain, sort of at the crossroads of the brain. And the hypothalamus tells the pituitary gland to tell the adrenal glands to make cortisol. This is actually super important, but it turns out we don't only have cortisol at times of stress. We actually need and have some cortisol all the time. And our cortisol levels under normal circumstances, normal boring Mondays, our normal cortisol levels ebb and flow over the course of the day. And the reason they're so important is because the cortisol is one of the keys to maintaining our normal sleep-wake cycle. Cortisol rises first thing in the morning, wakes us up, helps us to wake from sleep and to be alert. It peaks in sort of mid-morning, 8, 9 o'clock, and then it starts to gradually fall, and it falls all through the late morning and early afternoon, and it naders out in the mid-afternoon between 1 and 3 or so. And then it gradually rises again. It's high again, not super high, not as high as it was in the morning, but it's high again in the early evening around dinner. And then it's actually at its lowest while we're sleeping at night, from 11, 12 at night to 4 or 5 in the morning.
So is that the circadian rhythm, or is that different from the circadian rhythm?
Our cortisol levels and the diurnal or 2 peaks, that rhythm helps maintain our circadian rhythms. There's other things that affect it, things like light and dark, things like melatonin
My cortisol
production.
levels might be operating on a slightly different timeline than the one you just described.
So sure, right? And
Right?
we know that when teenagers shift their circadian rhythms, cortisol rises and falls at different times for them too. So that's if you're someone who's like waking up at 7 in the morning and going to bed at like 11 at night.
Okay.
Which is sort of like quote unquote the norm. I mean,
right.
Obviously there's a great deal of variation from person to person.
Right. So not the only thing at play, but one of the main things.
But an important one. One of the things that always makes me laugh is when people come in and they're like, I crash every afternoon. I'm sitting at my desk at like 3 o'clock and I just like want to take a nap. And I'm like, that's normal.
Yeah, we all should get naps. It should be part of our workday.
So think about this. Across the world, across the entire world, across many different cultures, people have come up with ways of dealing with this mid-afternoon slump. In some of the Latin world, they do indeed take a nap. It's called siesta.
I know. I love it. Very jealous.
I know you live in a culture that takes the other tack. I'm
Do more.
thinking,
Have more meetings.
oh, I was thinking more about coffee.
Yeah. Well, yes.
So
Stimulate yourself.
with coffee, with caffeine or sugar.
Hmm.
So English tea time,
Yeah. Mm.
fika in Sweden, goûter in France are all where you're supposed to sit down and have sugar and caffeine in the mid to late afternoon.
I never thought about afternoon tea that way, but that makes perfect sense. But
Doesn't it?
also, when you're working in an office, everyone starts wandering around looking for snacks at that
Mm-hmm.
time. And
Mm-hmm.
in your mind, it's like the workday's almost over, but it's not over yet. And you
Yeah.
feel like you need something to get you through the day, but you literally do need something to get you through the day because it's nap time.
Right. It's nap time. And then,
Again, another Seinfeld reference, that episode where George takes a nap
yeah.
under his desk. I always thought that was brilliant and wanted to
Yes.
try and do it.
Where he had the shelf put in and he had the
Mhm.
alarm clock and
Yep.
the pillow. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's very attractive. And it's happening for a reason. Your cortisol levels are low. But
Okay.
like, think about this. So think about the last time you had to get up like super early in the morning to go catch a flight
Yep.
and you were like pulling an all-nighter and you did okay. I mean, I remember this from being a resident. Everybody would do okay until like 3, 4 in the morning. And so you're awake at this time, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, when your cortisol levels are still super low. And I always feel nauseated. And
Yeah.
like I just can't keep my eyes open. And actually, nausea is a symptom of not having enough cortisol. So
Oh,
it's
there you go.
like your cortisol is super, super low, and your body is like, we can't do this right now.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to be doing this right now.
Hmm.
So we have to have some cortisol, and our cortisol rises and falls throughout the course of the day, and that's normal and important to keeping our bodies running along smoothly.
What is the point of rising and, I mean, obviously going to sleep and getting up is a rise and fall
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense because we need to go to sleep and recharge and all those other, we'll have a whole episode about sleep probably at some point.
Yeah.
But why the afternoon slump?
I know. Isn't that a good question? I don't actually know the answer to that.
I- It's a
Yeah,
good
like
question.
why doesn't it just stay sort of middling high all day long and then
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
maybe that's just not possible because it is a
Yeah.
cycle, but I don't know.
The adrenal system and the cortisol feedback loop obviously developed as we were evolving and is so totally critical to our survival that it's one of the most well-preserved systems in our bodies. There are rarely things that go wrong with it that are not environmentally imposed. Well, obviously there was some benefit to having that afternoon lull. It may have been so that we could be alert in the evening at a time when, being alert might be important for our survival. When we're stressed, we make more cortisol. And we're, living in the hunter-gatherer days, and all of a sudden we're out doing something away from our camp and we run into a, good old saber-toothed tiger.
My
And
favorite predator.
of course. And we need to think fast, figure out what to do, and probably we need to run away, and we need to run away very quickly.
I was just going to say, run away, run away.
And so cortisol, when we get this surge of cortisol, it makes our heart beat faster. It releases stored sugar from our liver and from our fat cells. It pumps more blood and sugar to our brain and to our muscles, and it allows us to intensely focus and to do more physical activity before our muscles become tired, to support the need to think about what we need to do to get away from the predator and do the physical work we need to do it.
So this is our survival instinct, right? This is what we call fight or flight, but is really fight, flight, or freeze. which is
Yes.
now accepted. Like
Yes.
there are three things your
Yes.
body might do because not all large animals should be run away from.
That is
You should
true.
not run away from a grizzly bear. You should walk
N-
casually and talk to them.
Noted.
Yeah.
I'll remember that next time I run into one.
I learned that in Alaska where I was walking around a national park with a bunch of grizzly bears who did not care that we were there.
That is
But
so wild.
if you suddenly run away, they assume you're prey and go after you. So you got to check the
Noted.
predators. Some you should run away from and some you shouldn't.
Presumably, our ancestors had
They would have learned
anecdotal
these.
knowledge about
I
these
think
things.
through unfortunately experience, they would have learned these things.
Yes.
But that is the extra blood flow to your brain is so you can recall these memories. Oh, this is the animal that I run away from, or this is the one I freeze in place until it goes
Yep.
away,
Yep.
or I need
Yeah.
a spear to stab it. And
Right.
one of
Right.
those things.
Exactly. And humans are slow to evolve, and so we are still operating with the same system that our ancient ancestors were.
We are slow to evolve, but also we still do have real dangers. I mean,
Of course.
not so much of the wild animal variety, although
Yeah.
occasionally that is true depending on what you're doing. But a car racing down the road or a big storm, another human being, there are still things to trigger that survival instinct. I
Yeah.
think the problem is we've created so many more things that trigger that instinct that are not
Yes.
life and death situations.
This is true. But I think this is an important point where we need to talk about the idea that not all stress is bad. So I think when we talk about stress, when the internet is talking to us about stress and how we have to fix our stress, the assumption is that all stress is bad. And there's good data to show that that is not true. So, in fact, too little stress is not good for our brains, and too much stress is not good for our brains. But low to moderate stress, often in like bursts, is actually quite good for our brains and is really important for maintaining our like cognitive wiring and keeping our brains sharp and functioning. So there's a study called the Human Connectome Project, and they have done a lot of studies on stress and things like working memory and cognitive function. And what they have found is that both no stress and high stress lead to poor performance. So our brains don't function well cognitively when we have zero stress, and they don't function well cognitively when we have high stress, but they function really well in that sort of low to moderate stress level. So I'm thinking about like my kid going to take the SAT and getting his best score ever on the day of the actual test because of the increased stress and pressure of knowing that this was the actual test. Or someone who PRs in a race because, you know, this is the actual race and they've got those stress hormones pumping, and that allows them to run faster. Giving a presentation at work or like a talk where you really are on your game and you're thinking quickly as people are asking you questions because there's just a little bit of stress in that situation.
I was going to ask, what is a little bit? I mean, does anyone lead a life with zero stress?
Probably not,
I think
but I
that
would
would be
say
pretty
that,
rare.
that there are probably situations in which people avoid the short but moderately stressful situation because it can be uncomfortable.
Sure. I think we should also just pause and separate stress from anxiety, if that's possible, because, you know, like thinking about right before a presentation, I personally will get super nervous about it right before the presentation. Like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then it's like an hour before and I'm getting ready and I start to, you know, like freak out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. I need to have all my prep stuff. And I get what I would describe as anxious, but also could be described as stress. Is there a difference? What is the difference?
Yeah, this is really difficult to tease apart. And I think that some of that is because of the way we use the word anxious and anxiety. So, cortisol can cause anxiety, which is the real mood disorder, anxiety. But I think sometimes now we talk about anxiety colloquially in a way that is slightly different from that mood disorder. And I think that that would probably be more in the category of like moderate stress.
Yeah.
So anxiety by definition, either out of proportion to the situation or feeling anxious when there is no situation, when there is no threat. It's a maladaptation of the brain, right? The brain perceiving threat when there isn't one, or perceiving a threat to be bigger than it is, and turning on all these systems.
I think that's right. And as a person who does have some anxiety, I would say when it's anxiety versus just some stress, the anxiety might prevent me from doing something.
That's correct. Versus
right?
Stress probably wouldn't.
Right. Stress makes
moderate stress
unpleasant to get to that
yeah.
point of it, whatever it is, but I would still do it. And anxiety is when I don't want to do it and don't do it.
Right.
Because I'm so anxious about it. And also, I would say anxiety then extends the period that you're feeling it. Like you said, it's out of proportion, but part of that is you're anxious about something for so long and you're, as we call it, spiraling and thinking about it too much and making it too big a deal, and you're paralyzing yourself.
Right.
So that actually makes sense, and I think is important because we do always talk about being anxious or anxiety, and sometimes it really is just stress. And then sometimes we talk about stress when it's really something bigger than that.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think it is important, too, to recognize that high stress or chronic significant stress isn't good for us.
Yeah.
So I think it's always helpful to think about some examples. I'm talking about like the toxic work environment, someone who's being physically or emotionally abused, someone who is, participating in the care of a, very sick family member, has a really chronically sick kid. Those types of stress keep our cortisol levels pumping all the time. And then cortisol can start to have bad effects on our body. It can cause depression and anxiety because it's affecting how dopamine is functioning in our brain and how serotonin is functioning in our brain. It actually leads to poor cognitive performance. It disrupts sleep. It can decrease our immune response and make us more susceptible to illness. And it can cause weight gain, high blood sugars, high blood pressure. And so we have to be really careful because we're talking about things along a spectrum where when you get to either end of the spectrum, cortisol may be doing bad things for you. But in the middle, this is true of so many things. One of my mentors used to say that all of endocrinology is a Goldilocks problem. You don't want too much and you don't want too little. And that's true of stress too. You don't want too much, but you don't want too little.
Well, an example I think of is when I was getting married and planning my wedding, which was pretty similar to the time you were planning your wedding.
Very similar.
Because it was only a few months apart. I broke out in hives and I went to the dermatologist, thinking I had something else going on, and because I have allergies and whatever. And he said, "Are you getting married?" And I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "I see it all the time in brides. It's stress. It's a stress response." And I was like, "Oh, that's weird, but also makes sense." And I didn't even feel that stressed, although I guess I was pretty stressed out. So now it happened a few other times during stressful times that I would break out in hives, but now I know what it is. But that's a temporary period of stress, and we all have times in our lives where we're dealing with really tough chronic stress, like you said, dealing on a daily basis with an ill family member, or if you're living with emotional abuse or abuse at work. And I kind of want to just point out that a lot of it is emotional experiences. We're not talking about working on the railroad back in the day, although that probably was stressful because there was the threat of death constantly. But so much of this is emotional stress. Something is triggering your physical responses, but it's usually an emotional thing that is not letting up. It never gives you a break. And that's when it becomes this chronic condition and causes all of these health problems. And so you have to do what you can. For some of these things, there's not any way out but through.
Yeah. This is where professional support in the form of therapy can be very helpful.
Therapy, medication, perhaps.
Yeah.
This is why we talk about self-care all the time. Like, it may not be big dramatic things you can do for yourself, but if you need to turn off your phone and go take a nap or snuggle a cat or do something, even if it's for 10 minutes, that will lower your cortisol level.
Indeed.
Look at me.
Indeed. Yeah, I think that the truth is none of us are going to lead stress-free lives.
Yeah.
And most of us will have some time in our lives when we are experiencing high stress. There may be different degrees of high stress, but it's hard to get through life without having someone you care about be ill or have a job situation that is far from ideal, but most of us do need to work for a living. And so I think most people at some point deal with this type of high stress, chronic stress, and it's important to have tools in your toolkit to help you manage that.
Let's just talk about what might be some things you can do even if you're going through one of these periods and you can't stop the stress at the moment.
Or maybe you don't want to. Sometimes people are under stress for good reasons, even if it's highly stressful.
You might be a doctor working in an emergency room.
You might be a doctor working in an emergency room. You might be a doctor working a full-time job and publishing a book at the same time that your oldest child's graduating from high school. Perhaps. Maybe.
I know someone like that.
Right? So all those things are good, but that doesn't mean that the stress doesn't have to be managed.
How are you managing this stress you're currently feeling by choice?
Good question. So for me, there are some things that I find really helpful during highly stressful periods. One is really prioritizing sleep and in a way that is really regimented. Giving myself a bedtime, making sure I'm in bed, having a very clear bedtime routine, and having those things be things that I really enjoy. Right now, I snuggle up with my 2 middle kids and we watch a show, and then they go off to their rooms and I settle down after, but we watch something fun and relaxing, nothing too intense. I use exercise to manage stress a lot. For me, running is a huge way in which I manage my stress. And so I really do try to prioritize exercise as much as possible. And the other thing that's important for me is planning, but a little bit like longer range, sort of thinking about, yes, the next 6-8 weeks are going to be very busy. And then there's going to be this period of time where I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think one of the times when chronic stress is most challenging is when there is no clear end. in some of these situations like we've talked about, or if that clear end is unpredictable. So say in the case of like a terminal illness. In this case, I know that when I drop my youngest child off for camp at the end of June, the rest of the summer should be pretty relaxed.
That's nice. I think at this point in our lives, we've all developed some coping mechanisms, and some are better than others. I wish mine was as healthy as yours. Running, that does not de-stress me at all. But I've been going through an extremely stressful period because there's family stuff going on many fronts, and it's ongoing and doesn't have a clear end in sight and is really a lot to deal with. And then I had breast cancer. There's other people going through health stuff. And so I don't have children, but I have cats. Snuggling and petting a cat or a dog or a hamster, whatever you have, really does help you relax and calm down.
There's data on that, actually.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
That's why they like bring animals into hospital, like trained animals into hospitals to interact with patients.
Having a cat sleep on you helps me sleep, honestly. So the cats are getting a lot of extra forced cuddling. And then we moved into a house 5 years ago, and we have a backyard, we have woods, and just going outside, even
Nature.
for 5 minutes, being outside in nature with trees and animals. We have a lot of birds, we have chipmunks, just being in the sun when you can, when it's summer, and we have it, because we don't have it much in the winter here.
It's true, we do not.
But even just going out and resetting for 5 minutes, I find helpful. And also breathing.
Just so underappreciated.
Oh, right? People give different counts, count to 10, count to 7, count to 5, whatever. But in, out, just thinking about your breathing, even for 30 seconds, helps calm yourself down a little bit. I've started doing that more when I'm trying to fall asleep at night. And there's a little retail therapy occasionally within reason. My husband and I both, when we're stressed, we watch a little bit of TV every night. And when we are just both mentally exhausted, we're watching like repeats of the British baking show, or we're not watching The Pit about emergency physicians. I do really want to watch it, but he's like, it's too stressful. So, we're watching something calming and pleasant and nice and something that's not stressful.
My kids and I just finished watching Parks and Rec.
Oh my God, I love
start
Parks
to
and
finish
Rec so much.
Yeah, really nice way to end the day with an episode or two of that.
Yes, a good comedy is also delightful. But
now we
my
sing
version
Bye
of
Bye
comedy,
Little Sebastian all the time.
my version of comedy is watching Real Housewives. I find watching them yell at each other very relaxing, and my husband does not understand it, but it's the truth. So,
Fair enough.
we all have these things, right? Or get yourself a little coffee treat at Starbucks. Like, can't do that every day, but once in a while, treat yourself. And I think the main thing is for everybody in any of these situations that you can't control, you can control turning off the phone, staying off social media, and just going in a room by yourself. Just be like, I need half an hour to myself. Someone else can be in charge for half an hour, right?
Yeah.
You just got to do it. Everyone reaches their breaking point. And I think as women particularly, we take on so much responsibility for everybody else. And there's this default that we will take care of it, that we will do it, that we will do the planning, we will do the driving, we will make sure the doctor's appointments happen, that the food is made and that it's healthy food, and remind people to do everything they're supposed to be doing. And we take on the care of our parents. Plus, if you have children, you're taking on the bulk of that. It's just a societal thing that we are expected to do it. And we do it and are pretty good at it. So then people expect us to just do it more. Like, well, you're so good at it. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, but you're so good at it. Doesn't mean I want to do it all the time, though.
True.
And we need to set boundaries for ourselves and push back and delegate to other capable adults who should be taking on some of this work.
So, but I think this brings us around to a question that I get all the time from women who are like the women you just described, right? Like maybe there's no one specific big stressor, but just sort of the stresses of day-to-day life are starting to get wearing. And so I hear a lot of questions about how this taxes our adrenal glands. And I think that this is a conversation on the internet. That this sort of chronic stress is taxing to our adrenal glands, and we need to do something to support our adrenal glands.
Okay.
And I think it's really important to know that none of that is based in science. So the things we just talked about, respite, sleep, self-care, those things are based in science. But taking adrenal support supplements, adaptogens,
What's an adaptogen? I don't even know what that is.
these are usually botanical substances that are thought to help our immune system and our cells adapt to stress.
Okay.
They're often antioxidants, but not always. And there's just not a lot of evidence that they are helpful in this particular situation. Our adrenal glands can keep making cortisol as long as we need them to in the vast majority of situations. They don't get fatigued. They don't run out of cortisol. Cortisol is made of cholesterol. We can keep making more.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't need to be taking fancy, expensive supplements. The things that you can do to help manage these stressors are both much simpler and in some ways much harder. But they're also the things that are evidence-based and much more effective than any sort of supplement or other, adrenal fatigue diet is ever going to be, because adrenal fatigue is not something that's supported as existing in the literature.
What I'm hearing is that there's nothing to do to quote unquote treat your adrenal gland for stress, but
Right.
that high stress, high cortisol production is creating other things happening in your body, and
Yes.
that's what you can do.
Right. And an adrenal support vitamin isn't going to do that. Getting some respite, doing all the things that we were just talking about, petting a cat, all
Petting a
those
cat,
things
calming your
are
breathing,
exactly. Those are the things that are helpful. There is science behind those things.
Listen, we do have a fight or flight response. That is what some people call our lizard brain, but we also have our cognitive function and our frontal cortex that we have evolved to be quite large. And so
Yeah.
what happens is you have that first instinct, but then your cognition kicks in and says, this is not something to be that worried about. Or, and even when it is something you're chronically worried about and is ongoing, your brain can say, you know what? I need to take a deep breath. I need to center myself. I need to take care of myself. And that is the bonus of having such a large prefrontal cortex, is overriding that instinct, that lizard brain a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. But is there a scenario where your adrenal gland does not work or your cortisol production is not happening the way it should?
Yes. Less than 1% of people. It's a very rare thing. But occasionally, the immune system attacks the adrenal glands so they can no longer make cortisol. And this is a medical emergency. It's called Addison's disease. I think the most famous person with Addison's that I can ever think of is actually President Kennedy had Addison's disease. Usually it's diagnosed in childhood or in adolescence. I actually have a couple of different patients who were diagnosed like late in high school or early in college. That's a very common time to get diagnosed. And because we have to have cortisol, we have to give these people cortisol, and they can end up in situations, if they can't get enough cortisol with pills where it can be life-threatening. So it is a very serious thing, but luckily it's super, super rare, and I screen many more people for it than I ever diagnose with it.
JFK.
JFK.
Popping pills.
Well, some of those were cortisol, but some of them were not.
What is life-threatening about it? If we don't have cortisol, stress, is it that we just literally can't function at all without it?
Without cortisol, particularly in stressful situations, you can end up in a situation called adrenal crisis. Basically, you'll lose weight. You can't maintain your blood pressure. So blood pressure will be really, 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 really low. Electrolytes like sodium and potassium can get all off. It is a really dangerous thing. Our cortisol levels rise when we get sick to help our body fight off infection. And so oftentimes these kids get diagnosed because they get sick with a run-of-the-mill virus, and then that tips things off.
Oh, so talk about that. What is cortisol doing when we get sick?
So it's, cortisol doesn't know. It's a molecule, right? So it doesn't know, and our adrenal glands don't know whether the stress we're experiencing is the saber-toothed tiger or whether it's a virus.
Oh, so you're saying we don't have sentient hormones in
we
our
don't
body?
have sentient hormones or sentient glands. We are sentient as a whole, but our individual parts are not. And so it does the same things. It increases our heart rate. It increases circulation. It helps the brain and the blood vessels function better. And the reason that that's important is because when we get sick, our body needs more support. Our different organs need that support to fight off the infection.
So, cortisol.
Very important. One of the most important hormones we have.
Pretty important. Pretty good.
Pretty good, but a Goldilocks thing. You don't want too little, and you don't want too much.
Thinking about this, I'm like, well, if it increases your heart rate, in a way, it sounds like exercise, right? Like it's good for you to have extra blood flow and higher heart rate, except that you're not supposed to exercise 24/7 either.
Correct. And
right?
Your heart can't beat at a high rate 24/7.
Correct. So it's the same as all things. You don't want to have too much happening. You don't want to have your cortisol at a high all the time.
Right.
But the takeaway is that you're not treating the cortisol per se.
You're treating the thing that is causing.
The thing that's causing it, and when you can't, there are situations where we can't control.
Right.
Then you're treating the results. You're basically calming your system down in whatever way you can, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of explaining it.
Because whether it's before or after, you need to calm all these things working in tandem as a system,
so that they
in
can
whatever
keep
way
functioning.
Works for you.
Yeah,
and that may require professional support. Highly recommend it.
Highly recommend it.
And also, one of the things I forgot to say, one of the things I've started doing is just talking to friends a little more often.
There's a lot of data around the importance of social contact, around things like laughing, around physical touch, but community support.
Yeah. I'm getting most of my physical touch from the cats, but just kidding. But it's really hard at this time of life to spend time with your friends because they don't all live down the hall like on Friends, which I've always been like, who wants to live next door to me? Come on, people. I want easy access to someone to hang out with. But
in
reality,
retirement, when I'm a widow, I'll live next door.
We'll all live in our community house that we've already talked about. But just reminding myself, I do have friends, and they do support me, and reaching out via text is one thing, and everybody sends memes on social media. That's another thing. But it's been nice to just talk Like, I have one friend, we just started
Yeah.
talking on the phone once a week.
Yeah.
We live in different states, so we don't get to hang out that much.
Yeah.
But just talking and catching up once a week is amazing. And I don't like talking on the phone. I don't like making phone calls, but chatting with a friend is really nice. And for me, venting about stuff has always been a stress reliever. I'm a huge gossip. So there are studies about the benefits of gossip.
There are. But see, that's why this is so fun.
It is.
I get to hang out together, chat with a friend.
Exactly. So, go chat with a friend.
Your experience is real, and you deserve to feel your best.
Help us help you get savvy. Send us topics and questions using the email address askask@thesavvypatient.com.
Listen to new episodes on Wednesdays.
Follow us on all the things.
And subscribe to the Savvy Patient Substack.
Please rate, like, and subscribe. And tell all of your friends.